What's up, guys? This is Omar Best, and welcome to the podcast, How to Be a Stock Market Player podcast. This is podcast 4, and it is the second part of the 7-part podcast series, What is the Best Company to Invest in? In part 1, we answered the question, What is the best company to invest in? And if you listen to podcast 3, you now understand that the best companies to invest in are companies that will last for a long time. And naturally, the next question that we tackled was, how do you determine what are companies that will last for a long time? And we mentioned 6 characteristics. I mentioned 6 characteristics, which are qualities of companies that will last for a long time. And those 6 characteristics that we discussed in the last podcast was, one, we talked about the company offers products and services that people want and need. 2, the company has the ability to adapt to change. 3, the company has a competitive advantage. 4, the company controls the supply chain. 5, the company is involved in an industry that has high barriers of entry. And lastly, and most importantly, we talked about the company puts its customers first. In this podcast, we will discuss the first quality, the first characteristic of a company that will last for a long time. And that characteristic or that quality is the company offers products or services that people want or need. So let's jump right into it. Essentially, in order for a company to be in business, they need to have one, they need to have a product or service, and two, they need to have a product or service that people want or need. And an added plus would be to have a product or service that people want and they need. They want it and they need. In short, the business has to have a market. It has to have a customer base for their products or services. So let's take a closer look at wants and needs. What is the difference between the two? Well, a want is something that a customer can do without, and a need is something that a customer has to have. And if we can look at it in a personal perspective. When we're looking at our daily budgets, right now, especially in the United States, there's a lot of people having a lot of tough times, and when you're having tough times, you go through your budget and you go through things that you spend on a daily, monthly, weekly basis, and you look at those things closely, and you find things that I can do without that. I can do without this. I can do without this. Those things that you have no problem cutting out of your budget are things that are just wants. They're not necessarily something that you need to survive. However, when you go down that budget, you'll notice that, well, I gotta have that. I gotta have that. I got to have that. Those are things that you need that you can't really do without. So those are products or services that you actually need to make it on a daily basis. So that is the difference. The difference is, well, one is something that you can easily cut out. You really don't need it to survive. And two, a need is something that you have to have in order for you to survive. Another thing that I would like to talk about is that companies, for the most part, provide products and services for 2 types of customers. There are commercial customers, and then there are just regular people. Commercial customers would be like businesses, they can be large or small businesses, and it can also involve government entities or public entities. And people, that would include me or you. So you have products that companies will not necessarily use, or commercial customers will not necessarily use, but we as normal people or average working people, there are products that we use that a company won't use. We need toothpaste. A company doesn't necessarily need to buy toothpaste. We need toilet tissue. A company does not necessarily have to buy toilet tissue. So that's an example. It's a weird example, but that's That's the only example that I can really come up with right now. Okay, so let's move forward. Some examples of products and services that companies want but do not necessarily need. Some products and services that customers want but do not necessarily need. Candy. Candy. I have not met a person to date that does not like something sweet, does not like candy. Um, so candy is one of those things that we want, that we crave, but it's something that we can actually live without. Cigarettes. Oh my goodness. Now, people who don't smoke, you won't understand. But people who smoke, they understand that if you do not have their cigarette, there will be a big problem. I worked in a retail store, manager for a retail store for about 9 years, and I saw this up close and personal. I've seen people who will argue about the price of the cigarettes. You tell them that the price of the pack of cigarettes is $6, and they will sit up there and they will be like, "Are you out of your effing mind? Are you crazy?" And then after all of that, they will say, "Give me 2 packs." Amazing. Cigarettes are they're a powerful thing. A lot of people, smokers, they want their cigarettes. You as a non-smoker, you don't understand it, but I'm telling you, cigarettes are powerful. Beer. Everybody likes beer. That's something that we don't necessarily have to have, but people want it. People associate beer with having a good time. Amusement park services or entertainment services. We don't necessarily need that, but people want it. People want to go to Disney World. People want to go to the Six Flags amusement parks. But these are some things that we can easily cut out of our budget. Cable television services. We don't necessarily need to have HBO, Showtime, ESPN, but people want it. They want to have those services. Um, Another thing is fast food. That's one of the things that's one of our biggest things that we spend on as individuals. Is at least in my case, uh, I spend a lot of money on fast food. And if you're going through a financial crisis, that is one of the first things that you would cut off of your budget is your fast food spending. That's one of the easiest things that you can cut off of your budget is fast food spending. So let's move into products and services that customers need. Okay, electricity. Everybody needs electricity going into their house to power their TVs, to charge up their cellular phones. You need electricity. Electricity is everybody has to have it. Gas. Whether you have gas in your that you need for your cars or gas that you need running to your house, you need gas. Water. You need running water in your house. If you don't have running water in your house, you can't take a shower. Uh, Toothpaste. Everybody needs toothpaste. Um, Everybody needs toilet tissue. I don't know of any person in the world who does not need toilet tissue. Um, you need shelter. And that's a little bit of a general statement, but there are companies out there, corporations that you actually can invest in that provide people with residential. They own apartment complexes, and people need a place to stay. They need a place to stay. Um, so the other thing that I mentioned it earlier is that you have products that people want or need, and then you have products that customers want and they need it. And these are the best companies to own. These are the best stocks to have. Are companies that have products and services that people not only want, but they need it. And companies, the way that they accomplish this phenomenon is number one, they provide a product that people need, but then they spend tons of money advertising, branding, and marketing that particular product to people so they get their message out there that their product is the best product to service their needs. And an example of this would be like, everybody, they need gas for their cars, but they don't people just don't go to a generic gas station. I'm guilty of this. Even though it's a great possibility that the same gas that is at a generic gas station is the same gas that is at a branded gas station, people will not use, for the most part, people will not use generic uh, gas stations to fill up their cars. They would rather go to Exxon, Shell, or Chevron to get their gas. This is just a something that happens, and it's based on these companies have done marketing and branding, and they've pushed their advertising message on us. So now we have a perception that their product is superior. Another thing that happens is with you know personal hygiene products. I mean, everybody needs toothpaste. Like I said before, people need toothpaste. People need toilet tissue. For ladies, for you have sanitary products that you need. For men, you have shaving products. But you primarily purchase national brands like Crest, like Colgate, like Charmin, like Kotex, Gillette, because these products, with all of the branding and the commercials and the advertising, you associate these brands as being the best products for your needs. So these companies, like I said before, these companies that control these brands are companies that have, they're the best companies to invest in because they have a competitive advantage. And competitive advantage is one of the qualities of a company that will last for a long time. So companies that have products that they people need and they want have a competitive advantage. Remember that. We're not going to discuss competitive advantage in this podcast, but we will have a podcast that will be dedicated to competitive advantage later on. So, in conclusion, companies must have a product or service that people want or need. And the ideal situation is for a company to have a product or service that people want and need. Okay? So companies that must have a product or service that people want or need. And the best situation to be in, the ideal situation for a company would be to have a product or service that people want and need. Guys, this concludes the second part of the podcast series. Stay tuned for the next podcast where we will focus on the ability for companies to adapt to change, which is another quality of a company that will last for a long time. Thank you for listening to the podcast. Appreciate your support. If you are listening to us on iTunes, please leave comments, rate us, tell your friends about us, and also make sure that you check us out at howtobeastockmarketplayer.com. That's howtobeastockmarketplayer.com, or you can just type it in the search engine and our site should show up. That's howtobeastockmarketplayer.com. Once again, this is Omar Best, and I wish you all the best in everything that you do, and see you in the next podcast. Peace.